The whiskey bottle rested on the creaky wooden table like a prison sentence. 45-year-old Clementine Ross silently observed as her uncle, Rufus Callahan, extended his shaking hand towards it, more from need than thirst. She knew what that bottle represented. It was the cost of her liberation, or the loss of it. The Red Dog Saloon smelt of tobacco, sweat, and lost promises. Clementine huddled in the shadows, her frayed dress clinging to her gaunt body, attempting to become invisible under the eyes of men who stared at her like a caged prize. This had been inching its way towards her for weeks, ever since Rufus lost his last coin and started looking at her not as family, but as collateral. Opposite Rufus sat a stranger, dusted with dirt, boots almost through, and a battered hat hiding hard, unreadable eyes. He introduced himself as Gideon Marsh, a drifter in appearance, yet something in his eyes hinted otherwise. There was purpose there, calculation. Rufus slurred, "She's a quiet worker. Won't give you no trouble, just gimme that bottle, and she's yours." Clementine's gut knotted. She needed to run, to shout, but in the Arizona territory, where would an orphan girl go? Her folks had died 2 years prior, and she'd been left to the mercy of Rufus, a man who viewed her as little more than a mouth to feed. And now, it seemed, something to sell. Gideon didn't blink. He put his hand inside his coat, produced a small leather bag, and placed it on the table. "That bottle," he replied calmly, "and $2 silver." Rufus's eyes sparkled as he grabbed the coins. "Deal." The room went silent as Clementine's world changed. She had just been sold, bartered for cheap booze and loose change. She glared at her new owner, waiting for whatever was next. "Come on, then," Gideon said. His tone was softer than she'd expected, though it still seemed in order. As they emerged into the dust-filled air outside, Clementine overheard murmurs from the saloon. "Poor girl, she'll end up in a brothel." Each phrase stung, but outdoors Gideon surprised her once more. He didn't pull her. He walked alongside her. "Where are we going?" she breathed. "Someplace quieter," he said, "where we can talk." They reined in beside a water trough, moonlight pale upon it. "What's your name?" he said. "Clementine Ross." "That man inside, Rufus, is he family?" She nodded with shame. Gideon squatted so their eyes were at the same level. His voice was low, even. "You're not mine. You're not anyone's. Makes sense." She blinked, dazed. "But you bought me." "I bought to get you out. That's different." Her head spun. "No one did that. Not here. Not for nothing. What do you want from me, then?" Before he could speak, the saloon doors swung open. Rufus stumbled out, drunk with rage, holding a bottle. "Where do you think you're taking my niece?" He lurched toward him, bellowing about rights and family, as if those words hadn't already been washed down whiskey and abandonment. "You got what you asked for," Rufus snarled. "She's worth more. I changed my mind." The saloon crowd poured out into the street, eager for a spectacle. Laughter erupted. One jeered, "Let 'em arm wrestle for her." Gideon did not take his gaze from Rufus. "How much?" The crowd gasped in shock. Rufus flashed a smile. $20. Cash. It was a small fortune for Copper Ridge, enough to keep Rufus inebriated for months. Without a hesitation, Gideon pulled out a fat roll of bills from his coat and counted out the sum. Done. Even the air got colder. Who was this guy with that sort of money? No bum had that amount of cash. "Who the devil are you?" someone demanded. Gideon ignored them. "Take the money. Leave." Rufus grabbed the bills and headed back to the saloon, but not before he gave Clementine a long, sorry gaze. Sorry not for what he'd done, but for possibly selling her too low. The crowd dispersed, murmuring suspicions and half-formed legends. But Clementine stood frozen. Her only family was gone. She now belonged to a man she didn't understand. "Clementine," Gideon said softly, "I know you're scared." And somehow those 5 words held more safety than the house she'd grown up in. "Trust me," Gideon whispered. The words lingered in the desert breeze like a dare. Trust. For Clementine Ross, 14 and already cynical, it was an alien word, an illusion. Who had ever shown himself worthy of her trust? "Where are you taking me?" she asked, uncertain. "Somewhere safe," Gideon said, "where you can eat a real meal and sleep in a real bed." What would you do if you were Clementine? Follow the stranger who just spent a fortune to buy your freedom, or run into the night and take your chances alone? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which path you choose, because Clementine's decision would change everything. She looked over her shoulder at the Red Dog Saloon, its crooked signs swinging in the wind. Then to the endless black of the desert, cold and unforgiving. And finally, she regarded Gideon, truly regarded him. Apart from his scuffed boots and rumpled coat, there was something in his eyes her uncle never possessed. Compassion. "All right," she breathed. They walked hand in hand through the empty streets of Copper Ridge to the only halfway decent hotel in town, the Grand Palace. It wasn't grand, nor a palace, but it was clean, and above all, safe. Inside, at the reception desk, Gideon hesitated. "There's something I have to say to you," he told her. "My name isn't the one I used when your uncle and I did business, and by tomorrow morning, everyone in this whole town will know my real name." The hotel clerk, Harold Weston, glanced up. He'd worked at the hotel for 15 years, but had never had a man dressed like a vagrant produce a $20 bill and demand the best suite. "I want your best room," said Gideon, "and a hot meal, something for a young lady." Harold hesitated, glancing between Clementine and Gideon. Rumor had already traveled about the deal at the saloon. "Sir, I don't know if we can provide unorthodox arrangements." Gideon's voice turned cold. "The girl needs something to eat and some place to stay. You telling me this hotel can't provide that?" "It's not that," Harold faltered, his voice dropping. "It's just, people are saying things about what occurred." The meaning was unmistakable. Harold wasn't concerned for Clementine's well-being. He was concerned with appearances. Clementine felt the shame crawling up her like ants. Gideon did not protest. Instead, he quietly pulled out a card from his coat and placed it alongside the money. Harold picked it up and went white. His hands shook as he read the name. "Mr. Marsh," he breathed, staring wide. I didn't know." Gideon reiterated, more forcefully now. "Your best suite. Hot food, hot water, discretion." "Yes, sir." "Naturally, sir." Harold almost fell over himself, pressing the service bell. "Jenny, get up here now." A young maid came running forward, and when Harold leaned close to whisper something in her ear, her eyes went wide as well. "This way, please," she said. "Suite 7, top floor." As they climbed the stairs, Clementine couldn't hold back anymore. What was on that card? Gideon paused on the landing. Something that's about to make things complicated. Before he could say more, the sound of boots pounded behind them. Sheriff Marcus Kane burst onto the landing, hand hovering over his revolver. "Hold it right there. You're under arrest for human trafficking." Gideon lifted his hands slowly. "Sheriff, there is a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Kane replied icily, "is you believing you can purchase a child in my town." He shifted to face Clementine. "Step back, miss. You're safe now." She was stuck, suspended between 2 men she didn't yet know. The law instructed her to believe in the badge, but law hadn't saved her when it counted, and the man sitting next to her had demonstrated more humanity in 1 hour than her uncle had in 2 years. Harold bellowed up from downstairs. "Sheriff, You may want to take a look at this first. He extended the card Gideon had handed him. Kane hesitated, then accepted it. His gaze swept the lettering once, twice. His eyebrows furrowed. This can't be right. It is, Gideon said. Clementine stood by, frustrated. Tell me what it says, she demanded. Kane finally glanced at her. This man states he is Gideon Marsh, the Gideon Marsh, founder of the Copper Ridge Mining Company and half the silver mines in the Arizona Territory. The word struck her like a slap. The man sitting next to her, the dust-covered drifter, was one of the wealthiest men in the Southwest. You don't exactly look like a mining tycoon, she breathed. I didn't want to, Gideon replied. I've been on the road undercover, observing firsthand the impact my operations have on real people. Kane did not lower his gun. Even if what you say is true, it doesn't make what happened right. You purchased a human being. That's against the law. I didn't purchase her, Gideon replied. I paid the debt of a man to take a child out of a home that was hurting her. There's a difference. Kane did not move. That is dependent on what you plan to do with her. Gideon pulled his hand out of his coat again slowly, and produced a piece of paper. Legal guardianship forms, he said, signed and witnessed in Phoenix. I've been wanting to start an orphanage here in Copper Ridge for months. Clementine would be my first ward. Kane scanned the paper, his face growing darker. These are stamped 3 days ago, but you just met Clementine tonight. How do you already have guardianship? The room went quiet. Even the hotel staff leaned forward. Gideon glanced at Clementine, then at the sheriff. Because I've been following this town for weeks, following him, following her. A chill swept through the room. I saw her drawing water with bruises on her arms, saw her sewing by candlelight while Rufus drank away every coin. I had the papers drawn up in case I needed them. Clementine's breath stuck in her throat. Her own life had been quietly watched, not to hurt her, but to look after her. Her misery hadn't been ignored. For the first time in years, someone had seen and cared. You've been spying, the sheriff demanded, his eyes narrowing. Investigating, Gideon corrected. My business brings dollars into this land. I make it my business to understand what kind of world we're creating with it. The sheriff was silent. Then gradually he put down his gun. Clementine held firm, her heart thudding. She wasn't property anymore. She wasn't alone. And she wasn't going back. Gideon's voice pierced the silence, cool but sharpened with ire. I waited for someone to act. A neighbor, a family member, anyone. But no one came. So I watched Rufus Callahan get more desperate and more menacing. Tonight, when I saw him walking toward the saloon with Clementine in hand, I knew just what he intended to do. Sheriff Kane looked between Gideon and the guardianship documents still clutched in his hand, attempting to align the tale with the law. Even if that's true, he said slowly, you still committed a crime. Picking someone up is against the law. You could have come to me, worked through the proper channels. And how long would that have lasted? Gideon snapped back. How many additional nights in that cabin? How many additional bruises? How many additional meals missed while bureaucrats handed papers from office to office? The sheriff hadn't had time to answer when heavy boots and clanking metal came clomping up the stairs. Rufus Callahan stood on the landing, eyes wild, half-drunk, and shotgun in hand. No one's stealing my property, he shouted. The hotel corridor erupted into pandemonium. Put it down, Rufus, Kane commanded, whipping out his revolver. You're intoxicated and not in your right mind. I'm thinking just fine, thank you very much, Rufus growled. That girl belongs to me. Her daddy was my brother. That makes her in my care. I have legal rights. Clementine against the wall, her heart thumping, staring at the barrel of the shotgun. She had seen Rufus angry, but not like this. Not with a gun. Not so out of it. Gideon inserted himself between her and the shotgun, his tone calm. "You're already sold your rights. You've already taken the money. The deal is sealed." "I changed my mind," Rufus bellowed. "A man has a right to change his mind about his own family." Around them, visitors slammed doors, ran down corridors. Jenny, the maid at the hotel, had disappeared. Even Harold, the clerk, was paralyzed downstairs. Sheriff Kane attempted to maneuver for a clear shot, but the tight staircase left him no space to maneuver without endangering innocent lives. "Rufus, don't do this," Kane cautioned. "You lift that gun, you hang. You know that." "I don't care," Rufus bellowed, voice shaking. "Lost everything else. Might as well lose it all." And that was when Clementine did something nobody expected. "I'll go with you," she said softly. Gideon stared at her, shocked. "Number Clementine." "If I go, no one gets hurt," she said, voice firm against the tears in her eyes. "If I stay, someone dies tonight. Maybe all of us." For a second, her words registered. Rufus faltered. The shotgun lowered ever so slightly. But Gideon wasn't finished. "Sheriff," he said, "there's one more thing you should know about those guardianship documents." Kane had his gun still aimed at Rufus. "What is it?" "They're not only for Clementine. I'm creating a legal shield fund for any child in this territory ensnared in the same situation, supported by $200,000 of my own wealth." The crowd gasped. Even Rufus flinched. $200,000 was more than Copper Ridge Town would handle in a decade. "And any adult who harms a child under that protection," Gideon went on, "will answer not just to the law, but to me. Private investigators, security, court battles that never end." He glared straight at Rufus. "Ask yourself, Callahan, is your pride worth spending the rest of your life looking over your shoulder?" The air was heavy. The standoff went on, each second a lifetime. And then, Rufus shattered. The shotgun fell to his side, and he collapsed under the weight of his guilt. "Keep her," he grunted, tears glistening in his eyes. "Just take better care of her than I ever did." 3 months passed before the Copper Ridge Children's Home welcomed its first residents on the outskirts of town, a cozy, sturdy refuge for orphaned and abandoned children. Clementine Ross wasn't just its first resident. She turned into Gideon Marsh's loyal assistant, aiding in the running of the home with the same mercy that saved her life. Rufus Callahan vanished the next day. Some said he had left on a wagon train to California. Others said he'd disappeared into the desert. No one much cared to know. Sheriff Kane kept Gideon's true identity a secret. For a while. But in the Old West, secrets have a tendency not to stay buried for long. Word got around. A mining tycoon had gone among them incognito, not to tally silver, but to rescue a life. His deeds set off a movement. In 5 years, a chain of children's homes stretched across the Southwest. And Clementine? She became a teacher, an activist, a staunch defender of children who, like her, once thought they had no way out. She never forgot the evening when a stranger wearing dusty boots stood between her and the wrong end of a shotgun and turned her life around forever. Voiceover CTA. If this tale of bravery, redemption, and justice touched your heart, hit that subscribe button. Because we have more untold legends from the Old West, real and imagined, that will test your heart and restore your faith in humanity. And press the video on screen now. Because the next tale, it doesn't tell itself. It feels its way through you. And when it's done, you won't be the same.